From the deal with Iran to Cuba, President Obama not ruling out an executive order to shut Guantanamo Bay down. And already, Defense Department officials are surveying sites here in the U.S. to house the remaining detainees instead, a move that Florida Republican Congressman Ron DeSantis is blasting. Why do you think this is wrong?
Well, Brenda, when I was on active duty in the Navy several years ago, I actually served in Guantanamo for a time. There were over 500 detainees there, and the Bush administration would release some of them because they honestly thought that they weren't a threat. Well, we're down to 150 or so, and there's really no doubt that everybody who's in that detention facility is a threat. Now, when you bring them to the United States, I think you're creating security issues. Guantanamo is one of the most secure facilities you could have, but you're also going to run into legal problems because if they're in a federal facility on U.S. soil, there will be judges who are going to issue a writ of habeas corpus. And you either got to take them to trial or you got to release them at that time. So I think this creates a whole host of problems. And Congress, I think on a bipartisan basis, will oppose removing terrorists from Guantanamo and bringing them to the United States.
Well, I think this was one of the president's first promises when he took office, that he would close Gitmo. But you are right. These are probably the worst of the detainees left there. And bringing them to our soil, what does that do?
Well, that's the thing. At the time when the president made those promises, he said, hey, we're going to try them in American courts. The problem with that is that these guys were not common criminals. They were picked up on the battlefield in places like Tora Bora in Afghanistan. And so we don't have CSI teams out there in the middle of combat. You capture, you kill people who you're fighting, and when you capture people, you detain them, and they're detained because they're a security risk to the country. I don't want to set a precedent where the people that we capture in wartime end up in an Article III court, and you got to convict them beyond a reasonable doubt, because guess what? That's going to require our service member to have to go out in the middle of a hostile fire zone and collect evidence, and that is not what we want them to do. It would actually cost American lives. Well,
you know, some supporters of closing Gitmo talk about other costs. They talk about the costs of holding people there. I think it is $2.5 million per detainee in 2014. What do you think of that argument?
Well, look, I'm all about cutting those costs. I mean, it's amazing when you're down there. These guys get 3 halal meals a day. They get all these things, and I think that a lot of those are luxuries. I don't think you need to do that. I think you can cut back on the expenditures. But just keep in mind, the way they're calculating that is not exactly honest, because we have a system in the United States that's already running. This had to be set up because of exigent circumstances with the war on terrorism. But I can tell you this, you will need to spend more money in the United States to beef up the security, because if those detainees are being moved around our country, that will attract people to potentially commit terrorist acts.
Sir, let's move the discussion to Iran. The House is going to be voting on a disapproval resolution this week. There is a lot of criticism against Congress that the Republicans have not been doing enough to fight this. What do you think you can do to actually take what is one of the most important deals in recent history that is overwhelmingly not supported by Congress, that may just go through? How do you fight it?
Well, if you look at this Corker bill, one of the things that they had in there was that Congress is supposed to get all the documents, even side agreements between Iran and other parties. And that has not been fulfilled. We have not been given the side agreements between Iran and the IAEA, which essentially allows Iran to inspect its own military sites. So I think we actually have the basis to say Corker, the whole framework, is null and void, and I think we should force the president to submit it as a treaty. Obviously, he's not going to be able to get 2/3, but I think there's no way we should be voting on something if we don't have all the documents that the deal pertains to. I mean, it's an easy vote for me because I know I'm going to vote no. But I just wonder how members of Congress could honestly vote for this and vote to sustain the president's veto when they cannot look their constituents in the eyes and say that they have read all the documents that pertain to the deal.
All right, very good point. Thank you so much, Congressman. We appreciate it.
Anytime.
Vice President Joe Biden teaming up again with the head of the nation's largest union today. Are Hillary Clinton's donors watching and worrying? And unions using today to fight for a $15 minimum wage. Is this about workers or their own numbers?